Hello, everyone. My name is Hillary, and I'm part of Power of Work, which is a nonprofit that aims to get people employment and help in many aspects, including resume review and job hunting and interview prep. But this series of webinars is trying to get people ready for an TMF job. And a little background, this is part 2, so to catch you up if you weren't able to attend the other ones. TMF is Trial Master File, and it is the documentation for a clinical research, a study being done on the kind of the efficacy, the safety, and how effective a drug is, and doing this in people. And then, so all the documentation is really important. It gets put together in what is called a TMF. Back in the days, it used to be just a kind of filing cabinet where people would physically put papers in a folder. And what we've been talking about in part 1 and continuing in part 2 today is kind of the transition from a TMF system, which was paper, to now what is pretty standard is an eTMF. So we've been trying to train people on kind of how to QC documents, what are you looking for in a document, and then this 2-part series is on what an actual system looks like, right? And so last time we went over the overview of kind of why we switched to an eTMF versus paper. And then today we're actually going to take a look at a specific one. We're going to look at Veeva Vault. Now, these screenshots are from a certification program that I did, I think about 2 years ago, being like a Veeva Vault admin. And so these are older screenshots, and so there I will point out a few differences, and there might be other differences on very minor aspects about the UI and the layout. But the overall goal is to give you an idea of if you were to get a TMF job, what you would be doing in the system, right? You kind of now have the foundation of looking for to make sure the document is accurate. But now, how are you entering the metadata and just kind of a little bit of a familiarity of what it would look like. So let's jump on in. So Veeva Vault is a cloud-based platform, and it is, if you think about it, it is something similar to, if you're searching, using a Google or an Amazon search, right? So instead of where you're shopping for items in Amazon, here you would be looking for your documents within Veeva. So Veeva is a specific company that makes a Veeva Vault eTMF platform. There are lots of different types of eTMF. Veeva is one of the more expensive and the more widely used platform. And we will try to do additional trainings on other platforms. Another newer platform is called Montrium, which is a little bit more affordable and a little bit more flexible. Veeva is pretty large and it has a lot of bells and whistles. So if you have the team to support it, then it works great. But you do need a pretty robust IT to maintain it, because just like any sort of software, it's constantly being updated and you have to kind of review the updates to make sure that you want all the changes. So it does take a lot of people to support it. So it's really good for large companies. Whereas Montrium is a kind of, let's say, my second favorite eTMF platform, is great for smaller companies that kind of just want the job done and they want it to be done right, but not so many bells and whistles that you get lost in that. And then I wanted to throw the screenshot up here so that we can kind of, we'll dive into it later, but this is just to give you the overall picture of if you were to be in your library. And so like I mentioned, you can think of it as any sort of search platform where you are looking for items. But here you can just see, you can see the status of the document. This is the actual document, and so you could click on it, and it would bring up the document. There's multiple ways you can view documents. You can change your filters. And then over here, one change is that it used to be a gear wheel, and now it's like 3 little dots. Just kind of, it's like a different symbol they're using for your menu, right? So not a major change, but something that you'd want to make sure that you're familiar with, prior to starting an actual TMF job, right? And then on your left-hand side, you have your different views and your filters that you can set up. And you can see like study, and the different document types. And you can kind of navigate, right? There's a home, study info, TMF viewer, study management, site monitoring. And there's one note is that for Veeva, there are a lot of different features. And so we want to be focusing on the Veeva eTMF, but there's also like a regulatory vault. And so there are different companies can use other Veeva platforms. Remember, Veeva is just a company. eTMF is kind of the name for the system that you are using, and it's just an electronic TMF. And you are kind of a place to store and to organize your documents. All right, let's dive a little deeper. So Veeva Vault homepage, the main things that we want to know is the document to view where your documents are within the library, the reports, and then there's a create button if you're creating something. And so just quick note on this is that if you are, multiple people are using this, right? And we'll dive into this a little deeper, but for an eTMF, one thing that's really nice compared to a paper is that you have a lot of people who can now easily access this. So before, right, if it was just a file cabinet in one building, people have to physically get to the building or ship documents in that get placed into the folders. Whereas now a lot of people can use it. So we are trying to train people to be ready to be TMF specialists. So they're the people who are going to be reviewing and approving the documents. It's very different that when somebody who is the document owner. So you are uploading the documents, right? So there's a difference, and what you do is different, right? So if you're somebody who's reviewing the documents, you more so use the library or different reports to be able to see what are the things I need to process, right? Documents are coming in and I'm supposed to be QCing them. If you're uploading something, then you need to create or you need to upload your document and put it into the system, right? And it's good for you to be aware of all of this because realistically, TMF is a great stepping stone into a lot of different career options within clinical research, right? So one of the more common routes to do is to get into TMF, and it kind of introduces you to all these different departments and different document types. And then you might say, oh, I actually am really interested in what's going on with the patients. And so maybe I'll go more into clinical operations. Or if you're more into the science, you might go into clinical science, or like what I've mentioned before, drug supply. And so all of these different roles have different activities that they do within the system. So it's good to kind of learn everything in that sense, because then you it helps with future careers. All right, so one of the more important aspects is to apply a filter. So, and I will share these slides. We have all these slides available for everybody. So I know it's kind of small, but basically this is just a smaller version of what we just saw, where you have the library. And so you navigate to the library, which is that's your top bar. And that shows us all the documents. And then on the left side, you see that you have the options to apply filters. So we can, there's a variety of filter ranges from document type, study type, country, etc. So to take a quick step back, if you are looking at just to kind of remind you that what's in here, if you are looking from a TMF specialist standpoint, where you're the person who's processing the documents, you are going to probably see lots of different studies, right? And you might be assigned to all the studies to process the documents, or maybe just a few studies. So you would want to filter out your studies, right? Now, so that means that there's different clinical studies going on and they're all being put into the storage system. Whereas if you are somebody who's on the study team, you might only see your study, and that's just so you don't get lost and you don't by accident upload things to the wrong place. So filtering a study, it makes more sense if you are viewing, if you have the option to view multiple studies, right? And then here, these are the document types. So you know how we talk about the TMF reference model, and I send out emails with links to that and encourage you guys to be really familiar with that. That's because, as you can see, it's kind of organized into the different zones, and that's how you have your different documents, right? So we talk about zone 5 is your site management, and you can see the number and this is just an example, right? This is just one study, but the site management's a lot larger, right? Because it means a lot of documents come in from the sites. And then you can see your IRB, your central trial documents. And so you can get an idea of what is kind of the variety of where documents fall into by looking at these overall numbers, right? And having these numbers, we'll go into reporting in a moment, but having these numbers helps a lot because it gives you an idea to see how accurate your TMF is. You want your TMF to be complete. And if you drop down and you can see what you're expecting in terms of your site management, and let's say your study is finishing, you would expect to see lots of documents, right? Or if your study is really early, you'd only expect to see a few documents. And so being able to have this visibility is really nice. And that's why eTMFs are much more efficient and easier to manage than the paper system, because before you would see your drawers of eTMF and you might not really know, the drawers of the actual TMF, you might not know really what's inside. Here is really easy to have a visibility into what's actually inside your TMF. And that's really important because the idea is that the TMF needs to be complete, and an FDA or any sort of regulatory board or agency will come in and review prior to making sure that your drug is safe and ready to be sold on whatever market, right? So if you want to be selling it in the US, then you need to make sure that you pass everything from the FDA. So yeah, so this is the filters, and you can have the ability to select different filters options there. And then you will be able to locate the document. And then you want to make sure that it's correct. You can view the content of the document in this right-hand bar. So this is after you click the document title, and it opens up a page, and you will see the document, and then you'll see on the right hand the metadata. And this is something that I've described before, where right now when we're looking and talking about QCing, a lot of times we're looking at the document, but part of the QCing is actually being in the system and checking the metadata against the document. So I definitely wanted to give you guys pretty quickly the visualization within the system so that you can get an idea, because most of the work is always done in the system, whereas a lot of our these webinar series and the practice project we have is outside of a system and just giving you familiarity with the documents. Okay, so as mentioned, a really nice aspect about an eTMF is the fact that you can create reports, right? Before, when you had just a paper filing system, you just had drawers and you kind of didn't really have good visibility of what's in your drawers. And if you wanted to know, if you wanted to say, okay, for this one doctor, Dr. Smith, what do we have all of his documents? And here you can actually just create a report, and you can see pretty quickly where you stack in terms of what you should have in terms of your documents. Whereas before you'd have to open up, find your folder, but even then, like it was really hard to judge if you had a lot, right? Because like maybe the folder was really big, but that doesn't mean that it's actually complete. You could be missing some really important things. So being able to create reports is really critical and a huge nice advantage to having an eTMF system. So from the home page, remember there is like a bar at the top, and there was like reports, and so you hit create report. So I want to identify the desired field, select a report type, create the report, edit the report, run the report. So this is kind of an idea, and then I think we'll go through each step here. So step one, you want to think about what you're trying to capture in the report, right? So you have document type, document status, document name, document number, owner, expiration date. So for example, if you wanted to, you could run a report. If you're saying, oh, document name, why would I do it on the document name? You could have all of the documents that are financial disclosure forms. And you want to have it for all the sites and for every person you have. And let's say you know how many people you have. Running that report will give you an idea where you basically generate this Excel, and it shows you all of the names and also a link to each one, and that gives you an idea of what you have, right? And so sometimes if you're looking for something very specific, you'd want to have a report that's looking specifically for just that document type, maybe across the study. And then so step two, Once your fields are selected, you can select the appropriate report type, as you can see down here. And then, yeah, and then if there's there's lots of different types of reports, and you can, there's different items that you can find online to help you guide you for what type of report you want. And then there's additional reports that become created by administrators. And I wanted to touch on this a little bit because, as we talked about, there are people who are uploading documents, and they might want to have a report on looking at just their study, but how complete they are, right? And then maybe there's somebody who is working in the TMF, and they're trying to run a report on how many documents are processing and how many documents are still outstanding to be processed. So there's a lot of different reports. And then there's a set of reports that can be run just by administrators. And that's usually people from like the IT or the management of the records management group or clinical systems, which is usually kind of like the overarching umbrella group. And so some of those could be, for example, if you are a manager of a group of TMF document processors, you want to know how well everyone's doing, right? So you can run a report that easily shows you the different people and how many documents they're processing per week, right? And so you can get numbers, and you can get details on what types and things like that. So that could be a report that would not be useful at all to somebody who's on the study team trying to figure out what exactly is in their TMF, right? So you can get like deeper analytics in some of these reports, but that we're not going to dive too much deeper into that, because those reports are really only for people trying to get into that data and wouldn't be that useful for us today. So then step 3. So after the report type is selected, you decide whether or not you want all documents, or you can filter by the document type, subtype, or classification. And then you name the report, right? In the name, you can add additional description, or you can kind of figure out all these different features you can do for creating your report. And then once the report is created, you can edit it still in a few different aspects, adding different filters and sorting it, grouping. And then step 5, once all of your aspects are in there, right? You have a good idea of what report you want to do. You can run the report and view the results. And then what's nice is that you can kind of set up this report, but the report isn't, it's not like an instance where it's just like, okay, yes, you can download it today, but tomorrow or in a week or in a month, that the report data will be different, right? Because this is a very fluid system in the sense that people are constantly uploading, and changes are being made to the audit and the metadata. And so the reports change as well. So that's something to think about, is that if you create a report, as the data changes, the data in the report will change, which is nice, because if you get familiar, you can save reports and you can run the same report, but now have kind of a different status as, let's say, the trial gets more and more complete. Okay, so that was kind of the meat of the items. I wanted to kind of hit that quickly, but basically just how to filter and how to kind of navigate within the system, and then also how to run a report. And then I'll kind of going quickly into some of the benefits of Veeva Vault. I touched on this very high level, but as we mentioned, easy to use, flexible. There's a compliance aspect, ability to have collaboration, it's secure, and then there's different integration aspects. So I'm going to try to go through this pretty quickly so that we maybe have some time for any sort of questions. But as we mentioned, I just wanted to show you some screenshots here. When you're in Veeva Vault, you can think of it as any sort of system that you're searching, right? And so that's why I say Amazon or Google, because that's a pretty straightforward. Most people have experience with that. And sometimes if people see this and they're like, oh, this is totally different from what I'm doing or what I know, it's not all that different, right? So if you can think about it as any other software that you use, it becomes a little bit more friendly, right? You just have to learn how to navigate and how to work around it, but it's still pretty easy. All right, and flexibility, as I mentioned, is a huge benefit to the industry in terms of the fact that you can use it anywhere and you don't have to access the building that has the Veeva, or not the Veeva, the eTMF. And then compliance-wise, I do want to go over more aspects of compliance in the future. But for example, like 21 CFR Part 11 compliant electronic signature is a feature in Veeva, but in also a lot of eTMF, where you can sign things and it's like it has an audit trail. There's a lot of aspects that prove that that person signed it, and it's kind of got a timestamp and different parts of that just kind of makes things more secure. And so these systems are built to be very much aware of the compliance that's out there and making sure that they're following it. And then one of the huge benefits is that you have external collaboration, right? So before, you'd have a drawer with papers in it. It was hard for people to access it and have visibility into it. Here, a lot of people can access it and contribute to the overall completeness of a TMF because they have the ability to have all these different roles and permissions, right? I talked about maybe you just have the permission for the one study you're working on, and that's good. And so it's pretty easy to get access into Veeva. And then there's security, as we talked about. Before, you have a room and you just maybe have to badge, but it's hard to tell who exactly accessed what information. And you'd have a sign saying, "Please don't take anything," or you'd have a photocopier in there so people could photocopy it, but just make sure that they left the originals. All of that is now secure because everyone can access it digitally, and it's just a lot more security with the audit trail of who's accessed what. And then, yeah, it has integration. A lot of companies have a lot of other systems talk to Veeva, and they've actually improved that over time. It used to be just Veeva eTMF, and now that I've seen a lot of different companies use it as their CTMS, which is the clinical trial management system. And we'll talk a little bit more about these different systems and how they can talk to each other and what we use them for. And we'll ideally do that next week. So I think that would be a good segue, is that you've had some TMF in terms of how do you QC a document. Now, last week and this week, we've talked about what an actual platform is and what it would look like. And then we can dive a little bit back into some clinical research in terms of terms. Now that you might have some items that you're like, oh, I've heard this term, but I don't quite remember what it is. Then you can we can refresh you on that for next week. Yeah, I think that's it. There's a couple other slides on some more detailed items, but I think it'd just be better to save that for another day, and we can go into a deeper dive into the system in the future. But I just wanted to give everyone just a high level, this is what the system looks like, so that as you're thinking about this work, you can kind of imagine how it would be processed, since a lot of the day-to-day work is done in the system. And then at the end of the month, we are hoping to have a couple of different people present showing the day-to-day work of what they do, and that can give you a little bit better idea. So thank you, everyone. And